Hi, everyone. This is the sixth lecture of week 5. And again, you can listen to this as an audio if you want. And please also read Genesis chapter 30, verses 14 through 43 before you listen to this lecture. In this lecture, we are going to be talking about two magical episodes associated with Jacob and Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, who is really portrayed as Jacob's kind of female twin. And indeed, though I don't have time to go into it here, twins and doubles were associated with magical abilities, extra fertility. Jacob, of course, is a twin. And like I said, Rachel is portrayed so similarly to Jacob. She might be a twin. As I said before, there may also be hints that Rachel and Leah were twins. Anyways, okay. So thus far, Rachel, whether she was a twin or not, has been having difficulties conceiving. And as I stated in preceding videos, there's a hint that God might be behind her lack of fertility, right? That unlike with Leah, or maybe to make up for Leah's unloved status, that God has kept her, decided not to open Rachel's womb, unlike with Leah, okay? As a result of all this, like all good matriarchs of Israel and all good kind of female characters in Genesis, as we've seen before, Rachel decides to take matters into her own hands. And this is described in Genesis 30 in verse 14 and the following. So in the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you also take away my son's mandrakes?" And Rachel said, "Then he may lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You have to come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. And God heeded Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has given me my hire because I gave my maid to my husband." So she named him Issachar. And Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good dowry. Now my husband will have to honor me because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulon. And afterwards she bore a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God heeded her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my reproach." And she named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." We are told that Reuben, the firstborn son of Leah, finds mandrakes in the field, and Rachel is so eager to get her hands on these mandrakes that she exchanges with Leah a night with her husband Jacob for the mandrakes. Okay, so why does Rachel want mandrakes so badly? Okay, well, if you've seen Harry Potter or Pan's Labyrinth, okay, mandrakes were, of course, magical plants that were used in witches, potions or witches' brew. And there are rumors that if you pull them out at certain wrong times of the night, they would scream. Okay. These plants, magical plants, were also said to increase fertility because they look like babies. And again, the Harry Potter movie really brings that out. You can also look up mandrakes on Wikipedia and you'll see what they look like. So Rachel exchanges with Leah for this plant a night with Jacob, okay, whose presence, Rachel seems to have all the time, but which Leah doesn't, right? And again, this is all in the hopes that Rachel will finally get pregnant. Okay. Notice again how one woman has love but no children, and the other has children but no love. Okay. Notice also how passively Jacob is portrayed. Okay. Again, the women are the movers and shakers, while the men are very passive. Okay. Interestingly, this magical plant seems to work, as Rachel immediately afterwards gets pregnant in Genesis 30, verse 28. Now, the biblical writer seems rather ambivalent about this magic, which is not part of the control of sanctioned religion, being affected, right? And they're probably ambivalent about it because this would raise the kind of uncomfortable idea that there is really very little that separates sanctioned magic, i.e. religions, churches, okay, cults, okay, whatever, from unsanctioned magic, okay, other cults, astrology, in the ancient Israelite context, this would be sort of priests and prophets, necromancers, healers, anybody who was not associated with the leading priestly class, right? You know, both of them, both religion and cults, center on magic. One is just said to be okay, and one is magically said to be not. Okay, anyways. And hence, the biblical writer wants to make sure that you don't get the wrong idea that non-sanctioned religious, i.e. magical stuff, can work. Okay, why? Because there is some economic ramifications to this, of course, right? Okay, anyways. So you know, so they don't want you to get the wrong idea. So they don't want you to get the wrong idea. So they add in this sentence right before the notice of Rachel's pregnancy. Okay, telling you that God suddenly and without reason, right, remembered Rachel, and that's why Rachel is now pregnant. And this is found in verse 22. Thank God, remembered Rachel. And God heeded her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. Okay. Notice how the writers doesn't tell you what caused God after all this time to suddenly, you know, remember Leah and to open her womb. Notice also that remembrance, right? In the biblical text, feelings and activity and action are very much more closely aligned, right? So God doesn't only remember. It's not like remembrance is, you know, only internal. Rather, when God remembers, or when anybody remembers, it is followed immediately by an activity, because internality, internal emotions and activity, physical things that, you know, things that you do are closely connected. They're much more closely connected in the biblical text, okay? So all of a sudden, without telling you, God suddenly remembers Rachel and opens her womb. Okay, and again, this is probably, I think, to prevent the reader, from getting the wrong idea, which is, oh, maybe these magical plants like mandrakes work. Okay. However, it's interesting, right? As you'll see in the next week's video, Joseph, the first child of Rachel, this child that is born maybe because of these magical plants, interestingly also is highly gifted in magic. He has some magical abilities of his own, as if it's the plant that's influenced, whatever, okay, that influenced him, okay? It's not just Rachel who has magical abilities, however. Remember how I said that Rachel, in part, favors Rachel so much because they are so similar? Well, you know, interestingly, Jacob also has some magical skills up his sleeves as well. Okay, we are told that after his favorite wife, Rachel, gives birth, that Jacob suddenly remembers that he's still working for his father-in-law, right? And so he tells Laban that he wants to leave now, right? Why? Because he wants to start his own household. He wants to become a patriarch in his own right. We are told, however, that Laban is unwilling to let Jacob go because Jacob is making him very rich, right? Notice we've seen this before, that though they are not chosen, though they are not elect, those affiliated with the elect, such as Laban and Ishmael, do get kind of similar attendant blessings of success and prosperity. Okay, so Jacob, Laban realizes, is kind of his golden goose. Okay, and as a result, Laban and Jacob come to an agreement, and this is found in chapter 30, verse 31 and following. And he, that is Laban, said, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again feed your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and such shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come back, when you come to look into my wages with you. Everyone that is not speckled or spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." And Laban said, "Good, let it be as you said." But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that has white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was pasturing the rest of Laban's flock. There's a lot of wordplay and alliteration here, which is repeated in what happens next. Okay, so again, the Hebrew really brings out what's going on. So the agreement seems to be, notice that Jacob wants to leave, but Jacob doesn't have enough resources yet. Okay, and the agreement, so they come to a different agreement, right? The agreement seems to be that Jacob gets to keep all the speckled, striped, spotted, and black animals, while Laban gets to keep all the seemingly white animals. And to fully understand what's going on, you have to know that the word speckled, in Hebrew, this is nakod, and striped in Hebrew, akod. Notice how similar they sound to Jacob's name, Yaakov, nakod, akod. Okay. What about the black animals? Okay. Well, why do they go with Jacob? Well, it's because of what the word Laban, or what Lavan means in Hebrew. And his name, Laban's name, means white. So his name means like the white guy, whitey, the pale one. I don't know. Okay. Didn't know that there was like a white person joke in the Hebrew Bible to do. Okay, so for whatever reason, Laban, which means white or the pale one, however you want to, okay, will keep all, the agreement seems to be that Laban, or the white guy, will get to keep all the flock that looks like him. Okay, so all the white animals, while Jacob will keep anything that is not white. Okay, now, Laban, however, as we've seen earlier, is a bit of a trickster, and he's certainly not going to let Jacob go without a fight. And what follows is a kind of trickster versus trickster scheme, where Laban removes all the striped and spotted and speckled and black animals and puts them very, very far away from Jacob, in the hopes that the only remaining animals that are left to breed are white ones, and therefore will belong to Laban, the white guy. Okay. However, Jacob too is a trickster, and he has his own magical scheme up his sleeves. And this is what happens next. Okay, this is verse 37. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the whites of the rods. And he set the rods that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flock came to drink. And since they bred when they drank, the flocks bred in front of the rods, and so the flock produced young that were striped and speckled and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks towards the striped and the completely black animals in the flock of Laban. And he put his own troughs apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob laid the rods in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the rods. But for the feebler of the flock, he did not lay them. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob. Thus the man grew exceedingly rich and had large flocks and male and female slaves and camels and donkeys. Okay. So Jacob needs to somehow get white animals to produce spotted, speckled, striped, or black animals, right? So how does he do this? Right. And again, notice, he kind of magically transforms the flock, okay, Laban's white flock. Okay. And he does this by putting spotted objects, so he first, takes some wood pieces and, makes them spotted and striped, right? So he puts striped or spotted items in front of the animals when they are drinking water and when they are mating. And it seems to be somehow drinking water and mating are related or happen simultaneously. It's not quite clear, okay? And this, by putting spotted or striped or speckled or dark objects in front of the flock while they are mating seems to magically produce spotted and speckled and dark animals. What seems to be reflected here is something that is known as maternal impression, right? This idea that what the mother looks at when they're pregnant or conceiving, right, is what their children will look like. And there's these kind of funny rabbinic stories where the rabbis advise pregnant women to look at this particularly handsome rabbi so that their child will look like him. And I do wonder whether this is like their Jewish kind of like mailman joke, okay? It's not clear. The biblical text, again, they're not interested in exactly how this works, right? Only that it is successful, right? And as with Rachel, the writers at points seem rather ambivalent about the fact that Jacob's kind of maternal impression magical trick is effective, okay? As a result, later in Genesis 31 verses 8 or 9, the writers portray Jacob as saying how it is actually God who was behind this kind of magical transformation of Laban's flocks. Okay. Again, magic, unsanctioned magic, it's not clear whether the writers want this to be seen as actually effective. Okay. Um, as I hinted before, this magical ability that you see with both Rachel and Jacob, it will be passed along to their children, okay, which is very interesting. Okay. However, before that can happen, before we get to the children of Rachel and Jacob, of course, Jacob has to go back to the land of Canaan, back to the promised land. Okay, in the biblical text, any movement away from the promised land was seen as moving away from God's promise, while movement towards it was seen as going towards God's promise. Okay? So hence Jacob, no matter how many children he has or how much riches he has gained, he really cannot become Jacob, cannot become Israel, right? The father of this elect nation without going back to the promised land, promised to Abraham by God. Okay. And as we will see next week, this means that no matter the obstacle, Jacob and his family have to get away, have to leave the land of Aram or the Arameans in order to truly become Israel.